Welcome, everyone. So glad you can be here with us today. My name is Nate Olson. I serve as the interim director of the Kegley Institute of Ethics here at CSUB. Thank you all for coming out today to today's event on a very important topic, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA for short. I'd like to start today's event with CSUB's land acknowledgement. We acknowledge with gratitude that the meeting place of California State University Bakersfield is the traditional territory of the Kitanamook people of the Tohono tribe, a place their nation has called home since time immemorial. The land on which we gather today and its surrounding areas are still home to many indigenous communities. We are grateful for all the indigenous people who continue to care for and remain interconnected with this land. We promise to be conscientious stewards of this land for the future generations. Before we get started, I want to say some thank yous to many people who made this event possible and many partnerships that allowed this event to come together today. First, I'd like to thank Campus Programming and Veronica Catalan, who's in the back there, for providing lunch for you all today. So let's give them a round of applause. Make sure you get a lunch if you didn't get a lunch already. I mean, that's one thing. I know we've got people on Zoom. Thank you very much for being with us on Zoom today too. We didn't figure out how to get you lunch, but I'm glad you can be with us today as well. Thank you to Valley Strong Credit Union and the Kegley family. Dr. Jackie Kegley is here today. They provide support for all of our Kegley Institute events. Today's event is one of a series of One Book Project events this fall. The One Book Project's in its 19th year of organizing a common book for Kern County. Each year, there's a series of events on the theme of the book. I want to thank Dr. Emerson Case, who's right here, is the chair of the English department and professor in English. He's organized the One Book Project for each of those 19 years. And also Lynn Kemmer from the Kern County Library, who I know is joining us on Zoom today. The Kern County Library also organizes many of these events around our community. If you saw on the sign-in table, we have just a couple of flyers for events that are part of the One Book Project. On the book, I have the book right here, actually. I should have pulled that up. But Whiskey Tender by Deborah Jackson Taffa is the book. It's a great memoir of her experiences growing up on the Navajo Nation. And she'll be here on campus on October 21st at 7 o'clock in the Icardo Center. Encourage you to come to her talk about her book. So like I said, there's many partnerships here. It's also part of Latinx Heritage Month at CSUB. Please check out the calendar for many events that are happening, have been happening over the course of the last month and will continue to happen. On Monday, we have an event where we're showing a documentary in partnership with the CSUB Center for Social Justice called Immigration, America's Bittersweet Dream. That'll be in the Student Union Multipurpose Room at 6 o'clock on Monday, and we'll have a discussion after that event. Monday, as you may know, is also Indigenous Peoples Day on campus, and on campus in the Magic Center between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. They'll be holding events there. There's cultural workshops. They'll have snacks and food. So if you don't know the Magic Center on the edge of campus, the other side of campus, but you may encourage you to come out on Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday for that event. Finally, I want to thank the Office of the President for their partnership on this event. David Silva, his position in the Office of the President. We also have with us today Dr. Kristen Watson. She serves as Vice President and Chief Financial Officer in Business and Administrative Services, as well as the Chief of Staff to the President. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Watson to the podium.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. It really is an honor to join you today for the conversation on From Policy to Practice, the impact of NAGPRA at CSUB and across the CSU system. I want to begin by thanking the Kegley Institute of Ethics for hosting this dialogue and by acknowledging the Native people whose land we occupy and whose ancestors and cultural items are at the heart of this work. NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA are not simply legal requirements. They are moral imperatives. They call on universities and museums and others to confront difficult histories of colonialism and dispossession, and to act with care, transparency, and respect. For CSUB and the CSU system, compliance is more than completing an inventory or filing a report. It's about rebuilding trust, honoring sovereignty, and ensuring Indigenous voices lead the way forward. Across the CSU, campuses are working to strengthen how we carry out these commitments. The system-wide interim NAGPRA policy gives us structure and consistency, but it's the daily local work here at CSUB that brings those commitments to life. That includes hiring a dedicated staff to lead repatriation and consultation efforts, building relationships with tribal nations rooted in listening and respect, and ensuring transparency about our collections and processes. That's a pretty heavy load for one person's shoulders. And yet I am so very proud of what David Silva does day in and day out. And we hope to find him more resources. These are not small tasks. They take resources, time, and care, but they are essential if we are to live up to the spirit, not just the letter of NAGPRA. This work is more than compliance. It's about ethical renewal. It asks us to transform our institutions into places that acknowledge the past and actively repair harm. And it invites us to see repatriation not as a burden, but as a shared opportunity to restore balance, rebuild trust, and reimagine what justice and respect look like in higher education. I am grateful to everyone here, our tribal partners, our campus leaders, students, faculty, community members, for being part of this ongoing journey. Thank you. And now I would like to have Dr. Flores, Executive Director, come on up.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. It falls to me as the Associate Director of the Kegley Institute of Ethics to begin to introduce today's panelist. And I don't think a few short words will do him justice. I have had the honor of working with David over the last several years, not just on this project, but in other forms. And so it is with pleasure that I introduce today's moderator of the panel, David Silva. He descends from the Pasquayaqui Tohono O'odham and Mayan people. He currently serves as the NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA repatriation coordinator and oversees the campus efforts and tribal efforts. As one of the co-chairs for the Indigenous Faculty and Staff Association, he is dedicated to providing and creating meaningful pathways to support students and staff on campus and in our wider community. And so I hope you will join me in welcoming David, and it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flores. So hello, everyone. As Dr. Flores has mentioned, my name is David Silva. I serve as the CSUB's NAGPRA repatriation coordinator. So what I like to do first, before I introduce our amazing panelist team, I'd like to give a brief overview of what NAGPRA stands for, what it is, why it's enacted, and also what CalNAGPRA is and the similarity between them. So I'm going to give a brief excerpt of both. And you can find this all on the National NAGPRA website from the National Park Service. And then similarly for CalNAGPRA, you can find that on the Native American Heritage Commission website as well, if you'd like to learn more about that. And also the CSU system, we have a CSU system NAGPRA website that you can look at for what we're doing as a system-wide effort as well. So for NAGPRA, that stands for the Native American Race Protection and Repatriation Act. It was enacted in 1990 as the United States federal law requiring institutions that receive federal funds to return Native American human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony to their lineal descendants, Indian tribes, or Native Hawaiian organizations. The law also protects human remains and cultural items on federal lands, mandates consultation with tribes during discoveries, and requires inventories of such items in the Museum of Federal Collections. And with that, we have California's counterpart to NAGPRA, which is a state mandated law. It's California's version of federal NAGPRA. That is the California Native American Race Protection and Repatriation Act of 2001, which is a state law that requires California agencies and museums receiving state funds to identify and return Native American human remains and cultural items to their appropriate tribes. It's also addressing gaps in federal NAGPRA law for California, and it serves as a parallel law to the federal NAGPRA system, ensuring that both federally funded and state funded institutions manage the respectful treatment and repatriation of these important cultural items and human remains. And so with that brief overview, I'd like to start to welcome our panelists for today's event. So first to my left, we have Dr. Mary Gutierrez de Jesus, Assistant Professor of Indigenous and Native American Studies here at CSUB with a specialization in Indigenous culture and language revitalization. And to her left, we have Mr. Curtis Alcantara, Tahone Indian Tribe Natural Resource Manager and newly named Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, which is a big movement for the tribe. So please, a little hands for that. Curtis has extensive experience in NAGPRA and NAGPRA as a long tribal member, but also he has done a BA from anthropology here at CSUB, so he is also a campus alumni. And then on the screen, we have Dr. Kent Sears, NAGPRA coordinator and lecturer with a specialization in anthropology and research collaboration with Inuit communities in the Eastern Arctic from Cal Poly. And then to his right, we have Jake Mausberg, NAGPRA repatriation coordinator from CSU Stanislaus. Jake comes with extensive experience working alongside Indigenous and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in Australia. So please give them all a round of applause for today. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start off the questions. For the first question, I'd like to throw it out to the whole panel team. What would be the key differences between NAGPRA and NAGPRA, and how do they complement each other?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this amazing panel on NAGPRA. Ultimately, the question on the main differences between NAGPRA and NAGPRA to experts who have been working on these legislation, this law, the implementation of NAGPRA. I just wanna, before we get into that, I just wanna make a quick note about the importance of NAGPRA and why having outside state legislation that is a counterpart of the federal law is so important. And also it is because we have to take into account that in the US, we have federally and non-federally recognized rights. So it is important that as we are moving into these state version of the federal NAGPRA, we also recognize non-federally recognized rights, which is one of the things that also NAGPRA does. So we just that quick note, I'm gonna turn over to the experts on the implementation of NAGPRA so they can focus on these main differences between federal NAGPRA and NAGPRA.
Yeah, just echo what she would say. NAGPRA strengthens a lot of the local tribes. It's not just the Tohono Indian tribe. It's not much being turned down. We've also got a lot of tribes and very many other tribes that are out. So it strengthens the lesser known tribes and the non-recognized tribes, giving the ability to participate in NAGPRA.
Jake or Ben, do either of you have an input on that?
Yeah, from my point of view, also in addition, with CalNAGPRA, what a really good resource we have with now CalNAGPRA is the Native American Heritage Commission. In my experience, that's been really helpful as in addition to National NAGPRA, having that as an additional resource for California tribes, but also for museums and institutions too, being able to have the NAHC database where tribes can use and have important contacts and also just good support as well. Having the Native American Heritage Commission is also a big benefit with CalNAGPRA.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit about like what this is NAGPRA. NAGPRA is a
Yeah, I would echo what everyone else has said and just reinforce that NAGPRA being the federal law provides a really strong foundation. And while all of us NAGPRA coordinators within the CSU have unique situations, it does provide a framework and precedent for repatriation. And CalNAGPRA steps in to make sure and ensure that non-federally recognized tribes are equally included in the process. And with both federal and state, really leads to accountability and equity. Thank you all, thank you. So we're gonna kind of shift the topics and we're gonna go straight into tribal sovereignty. So we're gonna lead with Curtis on this one. Curtis, can you tell us what does meaningful consultation look like from a tribal perspective versus an institutional one?
I think for me, from my own tribal perspective and working on NAGPRA in the past year, and as an archaeologist before that, really from the tribal perspective, all we really want honesty. We don't want to sugarcoat things. No matter how bad it is, just give me the best first before you eat the dessert. I'd rather see how bad it is first instead of figuring it out later. And it's been pretty bad lately in terms of what we're finding out. It's not specifically the CSU system, but all over the country. There's a lot of things that we're finding that basically the stuff we're trying to bring back home. So no matter how bad it is, as long as you're being honest about it from the get-go, it's the communication can stay honest, it can stay clear, and we can find a path to move forward. And really other than that, it's just I think to be very meaningful, to be very meaningful about promises, dates. We set an appointment, try to make it, try to be on time. These days it's very easy or very hard to miss an appointment with Outlook calendar. Everybody sets calendars now, so it's really hard to forget your appointment. So really, as long as you're honest about things and you're meaningful about things and you're prepared, you have documentation ready. It's not going to take you 3 months. After you've already reached out, it's not going to take you 3 months to get back to me. That to me has probably been the most meaningful out of any CSU, museum, university. Just honesty really is what comes up the most.
Thank you for that. Jay or Ken, can we get from you your experience as NAGPRA coordinators? What are your thoughts on how our institutions can engage better with meaningful consultation? Do you have any maybe tips you can provide the public that are listening here and all the people we have here in the audience of ways that the CSU is trying to make steps forward towards meaningful consultation? Do you want to go first, Jake, or?
Sure. Yeah, I could go. Yeah, in my experience, I've really seen meaningful consultation to me is consultation that produces results. I've seen a lot, not just at our institution, but different institutions as well, where in the past they have made attempts, to consult, and that's in the past I've seen it in the form of sort of like tribal meet and greets, but that essentially didn't lead to any repatriations. So being able to have meaningful consultation and establishing relationships with tribes and actually leading to repatriations, and also just having tribal members come to campus and being able to participate in person. And like I said, a lot of it's relationship building. So to me, that I think if you're wanting an institution to have meaningful consultation with tribes is to establish those relationships, do in-person consultations, working together, and yeah, having those sustainable relationships. That's what I've seen from my perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Jake. I think that the CSU has been making some significant strides over the last year or two in moving this forward, but that doesn't make the pain of this situation any easier. And I always encourage individuals prior to going into a consultation or even inviting consultation to try to understand as much history as you can, recognizing that there is a long colonial history of this happening, and just imagine what it would be like for yourself, your family, if this was you. And I think that ways to lead to positive consultation are to acknowledge that with tribal members, apologizing for that. We are making efforts, but in a lot of cases, the ancestors and cultural items that are on our campuses have been there for decades. While we are working towards it, it has been a long time. And being truthful and transparent is also key. And I also believe in trying to reduce as many barriers as possible to consultation. Tribal members can't just drop everything at any time to come to your campus, and recognizing that and working around their schedules to accommodate that, I think leads to the start of a great relationship. Thank you for that. That's really good insight, and that way we can provide everyone with kind of not just the tribal input, but also what us as the CSU system are doing. And I'm gonna kind of throw another curveball into tribal sovereignty when I'm throwing these to Curtis, of course, I'm not expecting him to speak on behalf of all Indigenous people, but this is to where he can provide his insight into some aspects that is on tribal sovereignty. So Curtis, when we're potentially identifying collections that we're doing during consultations, is there an aspect to where tribes prefer how institutions handle collections versus how they might have in the past? Is there a way where the tribes can provide input to these people that are handling NAGPRA collections, NAGPRA collections, that they're doing it in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I think one thing CSUs and universities and museums kind of all understand now is that every tribe is different. What one tribe says, it's not going to be the same for the other. One tribe might be like, just handle it and take care of it, that's not done. Another one might be like a bunch of like gloves, another one might want to be there. So every tribe is different, every person is different, just like every human being is different. So really just, it comes down just to asking the question, and tribes appreciate that. Tribes appreciate just asking. What do they want? Do they want to be there? Are they even okay with you opening the box? Is it even within the territory? Is it something they have to worry about? Really just taking the time, even to somewhat personalize it to the tribe, because every tribe is different. I would say definitely just asking questions. It's probably the easiest way to go about it. How would you like us to handle it? We're very certain duty there. That we should be aware of. Is there anything that we want to change? That could be the best way to go about it, just asking.
Thank you. And this is gonna get thrown to the entire group. When we're thinking of the educational component for NAGPRA and how that is incorporated into curriculum, is there a better way that we can prepare future professionals that are coming into the educational systems about NAGPRA, so that way they understand more of what this law is federally and statewide?
Okay, so one of the things that I want to mention in regards, especially as my role as Southwest Lead, here at CSUB, higher education, is being aware of the history. I know that in the previous questions, some of the panelists were mentioning this history of colonialism, but also the history of extraction that Native tribes have dealt with, not only with museums, but also with institutions like universities. And I think that being aware of that is essential to understanding why we have NAGPRA, why we have NAGPRA. So these are laws that do not come just because that governments, for example, the federal government or the state government gave or granted these laws to Native tribes. These were laws that were current from this history of colonialism and extraction that native tribes have lived with for centuries. So I think being aware of that, incorporating that into our curriculum, we do incorporate that into our curriculum with ethnic studies, Native American Indigenous studies. That course, just for example, that I teach here at CSUB, we talk about that. We talk about the ethical treatment of Native peoples, human remains, ancestral remains, but also just as Curtis was mentioning in previous questions, also understanding that not all Native tribes are the same. So also providing that information to our students, to faculty, to staff, to not to homogenize entire populations of people. So I think those are some of the elements that will be incorporated into our curriculum.
Yeah, I think one thing that could probably help is state invite a representative from the tribe, the local tribe, to talk about their agreement with NAGPRA, not just throwing laws on the screen so their student can memorize them and play them on a test. But maybe to personalize it a little bit and actually give them real world examples of NAGPRA dealings and how they got their ancestors back home, and what museums they came from, and how far they came from, how far they traveled, and really just to give them a concrete example of why it's needed, and it's not just a law that you guys mentioned as a professor just trying to get to understand. I think really personalize it. Just kind of like how this is taught, where you give them specific events, specific examples of how bad things are. I think tribes nowadays are kind of modernizing a little bit and being less, they're more open about teaching things and outreach.
Can you hear us now? Yes. Okay, can you get some input into that, the previous question, in regards to how educational institutions provide maybe further guidance, to for future professionals coming into higher education as it relates to NAGPRA and NAGPRA?
Well, I definitely think that engaging faculty at this point is, I take it as a responsibility of my own to talk about what NAGPRA is and NAGPRA is with faculty members. I get invited to classroom presentations quite often where students want to know, why do we have this federal and state law, and talking about in general terms, because I won't speak about specific tribes unless they give me permission to speak in general terms of the colonial history of what has happened and why there is this federal law, and also discussing some of the barriers that have come up through the years. I think that what we are seeing, I'm certainly seeing it on our campus, is that there is a new generation of archaeologists and anthropologists that recognize that those practices from before are ethically and morally wrong, and that hopefully we're going to continue to see those students going into institutions and becoming professors themselves, and not engaging in those practices from before. So I think it starts really in the classroom, and we'll eventually we'll hopefully see better practices in the future.
Yeah, I agree with what Ken said, having, students, but also faculty, having understanding, the ethical responsibilities when it comes to archaeology and field schools, and something we're trying to do similarly as us is we're trying more stations on campus surrounding NAGPRA and Cal NAGPRA, trying to get not just students involved, but other faculty and staff as well. Because there's so many departments involved, with supporting the NAGPRA initiative. So having staff as well being understanding of what NAGPRA is and the importance of NAGPRA. We're also trying to have more conversations in classrooms and conversations with student orgs as well too, such as the Indigenous Students for Activism, which is a student org here. And yeah, just having more workshops like we're participating in today, I think is really important.
Thank you. And you kind of touched on our little transition question, Jake. For the entire panel, what are some ways that not just campuses, but institutions, organizations, people that are not involved in the NAGPRA work, how can they support this effort if they wanted to potentially be involved to be a supporter and ally? Is there maybe internships, trainings? Is there any pathways for people that say are in this room wants to be involved and supported, but are not directly involved in the work? And it's okay if you don't know anything off the top of your heads. I would say more, let me redirect the question. You as people involved in the work, members of educational institutions, when you have students that are interested in knowing more about NAGPRA, what are some methods maybe that you can provide to the audience that you feel as educators or cultural practitioners that you would provide them that knowledge of how to learn more?
The first thing that I would like to mention is that about NAGPRA is that it does not only encompass this one discipline, for example, anthropology or archaeology, and many disciplines on campus. We're a university, we're built on native land, and native stolen land. And one of the purposes as well why we are an institution and we have this history as an extractive institution, we have to also acknowledge that. It's because of how institutions, agencies, museums were built in this country. But I think even when perhaps many of us are not part of NAGPRA communities or NAGPRA communities, I think we can also contribute to that. First of all, by acknowledging, learning about this history, being educated about this history as educators and professors. I think also providing that information to our students. As Chris was saying, not just by providing that information so that students just learn about that, but also being intentional about building relationships of trust with Native communities. Community engagement, doing community engagement with Native communities, prioritizing Indigenous and Native knowledge, especially these processes of NAGPRA and NAGPRA, which is, I think is one of the things that you said. So prioritizing that knowledge, understanding that not all Native tribes are the same, that the Native tribes have different protocols, cultural protocols, spiritual protocols to care for ancestral remains, and it is important to acknowledge that as our students, for example, here on campus are aware of that. Now, as I was mentioning before, how to homogenize entire Native Indigenous communities so that students are also aware of those cultural differences as well. Being intentional about creating the pathways in our curriculum so that our students know this information and they are aware, and perhaps also partnering with communities, not only here at CSUB, but also close to CSU, so that if anyone is interested, so that they could find that information to contribute to that. Even, for example, if there's a professor who is not part of a NAGPRA community, who has expertise in those areas, perhaps, bringing all these, people who have that knowledge to contribute to that, to acknowledge tribal sovereignty, cultural sovereignty, but also the ethical practices that are involved in, NAGPRA, ethical NAGPRA, with NAGPRA, because this is More than just, for example, legal obligation that comes from these laws, but there is also a moral obligation because of this, history of injustices. So it is important to also, address those historical injustices and bring back also the dignity of, of relatives that are in museums and collections, universities.
Yeah, I think, if you want to learn about it, talk to your local, NAGPRA reporter. Talk to you like from here, talk to David. I think he would teach you everything you need to know. But also, if you're really curious, you can call your local tribe. You guys give me a call. We can talk about NAGPRA all day. It's something I like to talk about. If you really want to learn, the different steps of it, what it really means to tribes, how to get proficient with it, how to get involved. I guarantee you your local CSU, if you're not from around here, needs help some way, somehow doing something. So if it's something like that, there's definitely internships where you can learn how to do NAGPRA stuff and make some money over the summer. I did one. And there's trainings. The National Preservation Institution gives out trainings. There's several TIPO preservation programs that give out trainings for TIPOs and regular just people in general. If you're not, you don't have to be a TIPO to do it. But if you want to learn Section 106 training, there's plenty of those. The Advisory Council of Historic Preservation gives out plenty of trainings as well. 30-minute trainings that you can do whenever your schedule allows it. There's plenty of different trainings that you can take. If you want to go above and beyond, I was talking to your local NAGPRA coordinator. I'm talking to your local tribe. But there's plenty of ways we can do it to make yourself an ally for sure.
And then I'm gonna kind of switch the direction. This is gonna go forward to maybe specifically Curtis, Jay, or Ken. In layman's terms, why can I not give, say for instance, the Dome Indian tribe all of their collections back? Just because they want it. Now, I know everyone's curious, when we think of NAGPRA, NAGPRA, shouldn't we just give it back right away? And Curtis, you can kind of start us off with why we can just immediately give it back.
Well, it's like anything else. There's a process to it. Just like even signing up for Cal State Day, so it's a process and application. There's a way to do it to get enrolled. For NAGPRA, there's several levels to it. Some of it's CSUB controlled, some of it's agency controlled, or that's Bureau of Land Management, the Army Corps, Forest Service. If it's agency controlled, CSUB really has no control over it. So I have to wait for them. Doesn't then have to talk to them about that. Instead of meeting with them. There's a very big process to it. They don't have to figure out who's even in our territory. Whereas a specific artifacts from ancestors from, something I need to worry about. Is there any documentation to it? How's it being handled? What's the duty of care? And then they go through the process of itself, cataloging, make sure everything's there. Setting up the draft that it'll notice, which takes, just to get to that point, probably takes 4 months, 3-4 months, usually. And then just to get the draft in is another month. The government shut down right now, so that's probably gonna be another month. And then you get that waiting period after that. After it's published in the Federal Register, that's another month after that for the days of nursing. So right now, I want to get some different data right now. And give exactly what, even if it's just one box of stuff, we're probably looking at 4 months of the waiting period. And that's if it's expedited. So it really is just a process.
Jake and Ken, can you speak also on the CSU system side of why we're not allowed just to repatriate immediately to tribes and our tribal partners, any lineal descendants or Native Hawaiian organizations?
Well, I think it echoes similarly to what Curtis had shared. It is a process. And the process is not in place to be burdensome, but the process is in place to be accountable, to make sure that the process is handled correctly. We have consultation because I think Curtis earlier had shared that each tribe is different, and we need to recognize that the handling of ancestors and cultural items is different for each tribe. The process that the local tribe here in San Luis Obispo is different than the process that our Solano campus in Vallejo has. And so the steps put in place with NAGPRA and Cal NAGPRA are to ensure that we are consulting and being accountable and doing this ethically and morally. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Consultation, we want to have efficient repatriations, but also not having them rushed, especially, we're wanting to ensure that we're consulting with all possible affiliated tribes. Also thinking about, once repatriations occur, if, tribes have the space or land, for reburials and also the associated costs that come with repatriations. We don't want to leave that for tribes to handle. So we're working on that as well. So yeah, it's a long process, but being able to have that meaningful consultation and, not just, once repatriation occurs, but afterwards, we want to be able to follow through with that and, continuing those relationships with tribes.
Thank you. I think it's really crucial for everyone to kind of get a more insight into the NAGPRA and repatriation process. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as just immediately repatriating back to the Native American tribes, lineal descendants of Native white organizations that these collections and ancestral remains belong to. Like my colleagues mentioned, that it's a thorough process to ensure that, for instance, that we use Curtis and Dillon Indian tribe as an example. If I was to not double check the cultural items or ancestors that I'm repatriating back to them, they could potentially end up with different tribes' ancestors. And that, in a cultural sense, a human being sense, and an ethical sense, is just morally not okay. So that's why this process is so in-depth, to ensure that we're following cultural protocols, spiritual protocols. And with that being said, I know we need to sit to a segment where, Curtis, can you talk to us about maybe the cultural and ceremonial aspect of some instances with NAGPRA and NAGPRA in regards to how our tribal partners want maybe certain medicines or certain ceremonies performed? Is having the ceremonial and spiritual aspect crucial to NAGPRA, or do you feel that there's not a pathway open yet for that to be included into this?
Well, I think that's right. I can touch base on that of a previous question, which was how to make it meaningful. They would tribes really like it. You have to set a space available for the opening ceremony, song or two. Because some of this stuff is very meaningful to them, especially if you did it with ancestors. It's what makes it meaningful. It shows that the university actually cared. It's the university, community college, institution, and museum, whatever it is, to have space open for them to kind of, however they do their own things in their songs. That's more meaningful than you guys probably realize. Even if it's a place outside the building, someone's secluded or their own room, something like that. Definitely something that would mean a lot to tribes, and I think duty of care is another thing that means a lot to tribes. Sometimes I've had ancestors that are just the big bags that really just the fragmentary, you gotta lunch the lunch bag essentially. Because we're not really too happy about that, so they request to put it in a biodegradable box with maybe some type of muslin wrapping. maybe some tobacco in there, some sage, depending on which tribe it is and how they like to do things, it could be totally different. But they'll have their own way of how they like to, how they want the ancestors to be in a way until their journey finishes back. So it really just depends on the tribe, but some people do tobacco, some people do sage, some people like to sing songs. Sometimes the ancestors aren't even with the collection, and kind of separate, sometimes they like it like that, sometimes they don't. So I think the big 3 words here is do you care? So again, you can ask the tribe how they want to do things, just all that works on.
Thank you. I think it's really crucial to have our audience members see from a cultural aspect that it's not just the laws that we're following, it's not just a federal law, but like Curtis touched on, the duty of care. How we're caring for these collections, the ancestral remains, the significance to our tribal partners, and how we're caring for their quite literal ancestors. And so when we're thinking of this, and this is gonna go for the entire panel, how do you potentially see NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA churning in the future? Do you see in the moment that it might potentially alter for the better, or do you think that in its current state, there's room for improvement?
I think there's always room for improvement in any aspect of life. I think somebody touched on it earlier too, the new way of archaeologists and anthropologists really changing the game. The old mindset of we're gonna keep it regardless of what you say is leaving the anthropological worldview perspective, however you want to say it. And just to give you an example, there was a claim that we were working on. We were working on it for 15 years and several ancestors involved. And we had a new person come in less than 2 years. It's really just having the right people in position with an open mind. Really changed the game for all tribes involved. I think really like I said before, the way of anthropologists really changing it, and that's the way forward right now. It's changing the mindset of where it begins in the classroom. It's simply said mentorship in the classroom. I think that really changes it, and it changes that for more than any law thing. Because if the right person is there and wants to help the tribe, that really has helped us well.
Thank you. And we're going to kind of transition into a little bit more about CalNAGPRA, so that way we can talk about the differences between CalNAGPRA and NAGPRA. This is going to go through the entire panel, but when it comes to CalNAGPRA, what is, I would say, your biggest comparison against NAGPRA? What does CalNAGPRA provide that NAGPRA doesn't provide for California-based private partners, organizations, lineal descendants, or native white organizations? Jay, Ken, maybe you can provide some input on that.
Could you repeat the question, David? I kind of, you cut out on my audio.
Yes. When it comes to CalNAGPRA versus NAGPRA, what is the stark difference compared to NAGPRA when we're thinking of CalNAGPRA as a whole, in terms of California-based tribal partners, Native Hawaiian organizations, or lineal descendants?
Well, I think that the first thing that comes to my mind, that the difference is that CalNAGPRA has the requirement that we consult with non-federally recognized tribes, California tribes, and NAGPRA does not have that written into the regulations. And I also think that the other important aspect is CalNAGPRA allows for tribal traditional knowledge and oral histories to carry equal weight in determinations of affiliations.
I agree. Being able to have non-federally recognized tribes participate and in CalNAGPRA, whereas with NAGPRA can be limiting, but being able to also requiring museums and institutions, as Ken said, deferring to tribal knowledge, and especially when it comes to consultation. I mean, we don't want to be just referring to archaeological reports and just limited to that. And in my experience, being able to defer to tribal knowledge and referring to what tribal members, we're really relying on them to an important part of this consultation process. And this has also come up in this discussion a lot about asking questions, being able to ask tribal members questions and being able to, whatever it takes to allow for efficient repatriation. So that comes to mind when I think of CalNAGPRA.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences is what they had mentioned was allowing some of the manufacturers to be involved. And you really see a difference. I see a lot from my perspective from consultation requests from institutions to outside of the state. They're really just asked to consult, but when I get consultation requests from California, there's a big emphasis on referring to travel option. And the big difference in deference to tribal knowledge that really, it makes it a lot easier to consult as well in terms of really just, they're a lot more open-minded instead of following the letter of the law to the T of Cal, federal NAGPRA. Cal NAGPRA employs a lot of tribal knowledge and traditional based knowledge based on essentially what we're trying to help. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, I want to echo what some of the panelists have already said about focusing on small incorporating on federally recognized tribes, providing state-funded institutions to also engage in this process of repatriation. But also what Rich has mentioned, tribal knowledge. So very rich country emphasizing tribal knowledge. And I think that's completely set. It needs to acknowledge that tribal first about that knowledge is not only knowledge that is there. There are multiple ways of knowing or creating that knowledge, and of course focusing on community-based knowledge, indigenous knowledge, local histories. I think that also provides that information that is needed, especially in these processes of repatriation.
Thank you all. So one of the things that I think is most commonly misrepresented when we're thinking of NAGPRA and CalNAGPRA is that institutions are still allowed to go out and create new collections. So to the panel, is that still allowed? Can, for instance, CSUB go out and still go on tribal lands, tribal sacred sites, burial sites, and collect new collections to bring back to campus to examine?
As of now, well, I think for now, it's really just, anything that has to do with tribal lands. Or really just, here in town in general, return, send us a letter and ask if we can pay first. I think that's also a big change. Is there, if you want to do a project, do they send us a letter asking if we're okay with it? Which is a big step and what it was 100 years ago, like people just go walk, no, it's not, I'm gonna make it. So it's definitely permission based these days. I think more often than not, people don't like going that far off that far in one play. But yeah, definitely now it's you can't just go and just pick something down. There's lots of things that down. But it really is just a permission based. Being fragile or different. I'm pretty sure most will say no, but if someone were to say yes, then you could for now. That some time.
And then we're gonna transition now into our online Q&A portion. And Dr. Flores is gonna go around the room if we have any in person, and or Dr. Olson, and then we'll also get some questions from our online participants as well. Looks like we got one right there in the back.
don't mind you.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Rose, and I have a couple questions I've been taking up since you guys started. The first question is, how long has, been dealing with, been working with CSUB? With CSUB?
For me personally, I've been consulting with David since you got the position, really. How long's that been?
Almost a year and a half.
So it's been about a year, really just keep changing how things are done around here. CSUB Batesville, to be blunt, is not known as the best Cal State in terms of elections. But we are getting better. We just moved some stuff into the integration facility, but that's a lot better than what it was. We're doing a lot of outreach, making sure everything is up to par. It's getting there, it's not perfect yet, but it's better than almost like it.
That was another question, but I misunderstood. Another question I have, is how many artifacts does CSUB hold? And if they're holding a lot of them, is it open for dispute? Is it for artifact research purposes?
So I can't legally answer how many we hold per se, because I also don't know that. So if I was to tell you a number, it wouldn't be the factual number. The reason why we still have collections is like Curtis mentioned a little while ago, there's an entire process that goes to looking with tribal consent into the boxes that we do have, identifying what's there, making sure that we're consulting with the correct Native American tribes, the lineal descendants, Native Hawaiian organizations, or Alaskan Native tribes, and going through that entire process. Then, once that is done, and like Curtis mentioned, it gets uploaded to the federal NAGPRA, the notice. Then there's also the potentiality that another tribe might see the work being done, and they might feel that there's a claim, and then a competing claim could be entered into that. So there's lots of different aspects that go into that, but essentially, what Curtis mentioned, like for the last year and a half, almost, that we've been making great strides to improve this work. And so that's what we're currently doing, is making sure that we're getting to the point to where I can tell Curtis, hey Curtis, we have everything ready for you to go to begin this process. There's no more roadblocks, there's no barriers. And we're actually able to repatriate what we have that we've identified alongside you, this work as the home Indian tribe, either cultural artifacts, sacred objects, or ancestral remains.
And I have a question online. What steps are in place to make sure the cultural artifacts are preserved after they have been returned? How will the federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes fund the preservation process for the artifacts? And in parentheses, not ancestral remains, as well as store and or display artifacts, if at all?
Well, I think our main goal as a tribe is to put it back in the ground. We really want to be buried, especially if the ancestors. We would like to be buried is the goal for all NAGPRA, for our tribe. We do have plans at some point for a possible museum in the future. But for right now, we do have our own creation facility at our office. So we have some artifacts at our office that are up to par with state standards. But the goal is to be buried. We don't plan on preserving them forever. We want to put it back in the ground where we found it. Not exactly where we found it, but put it somewhere safe where nobody has access to it. And put it back where it belongs.
And also, to add a little bit more to that, I would say that there's also grants out there. So if you're curious in terms of how tribes might be able to support this type of work. So for instance, if Curtis needed extra funding to make sure that the creation facility maybe got an extra room to hold what he's getting repatriated back to the tribe. There's different grants out there from the federal government right now, not really because they're shut down, but when they're not shut down, there's grants that you can apply for. There's different potential private donors that are supporters of this work, allies. But at the end of the day, it's up to these tribes to decide how they want to do this work for their own collections, ancestral remains, it's inherently this work. It's always up to how they want to defer to their items, their ancestors. And in terms of display, personally, what I've seen is tribes don't want to display anymore because the whole point of this work is to, like Chris mentioned, rebury and ensure that they're no longer disturbed. From the time that they were disturbed and why this work exists as a whole.
Just as a point of clarification for the question, they were asking about artifacts and not ancestral remains. I don't know if that.
Yes, even artifacts as well, it applies to all of it, I would say, it's not just inherently just ancestral remains. And of course, I never want to speak for tribes, but that's why I wanted just to add in that. We always defer to our tribal partners for how we want to proceed with that, but from my experience professionally and personally as an Indigenous person, it's always been to rebury, not to redisplay.
Yes, just to kind of piggyback off that, yeah, and artifacts too. A lot of times artifacts are found with the ancestor. And we call those associated funerary objects. Or perhaps they're unassociated and they're not associated with the ancestor, but it's others in general, it's part of the culture, we'll put it back in the box. That's really our goal. Other questions?
So you all reference federally recognized and federally non-recognized groups repeatedly here. Can you give us a sense in California how many do these groups there are and how get a sense of how complicated this process is to find the right people?
I'm gonna throw that to my colleagues on the screen and allow them some time to answer that question.
Can you repeat it for clarity, David?
So if I heard Dr. Gates correctly, he asked how many federally recognized tribes are there in California and how many federally recognized tribes are there? And how in depth this is work to get this process done for them.
Well, there are, last I checked, there's about 55 non-federally recognized tribes in California, according to the Native American Heritage Commission. And I believe there's over 60 or 109 federally recognized tribes. I need to check my numbers, but there are a number of federally recognized tribes. And even though that there are a large number of federally recognized tribes, that doesn't mean that geographically there's great representation. I know, for example, our colleagues in LA County, there's no non-federal or no federally recognized tribes there. And so it does pose some challenges because federal NAGPRA does require that, even though Cal NAGPRA requires us to consult with non-federally recognized tribes, when we are determining cultural affiliation with NAGPRA, that has to be with a federally recognized tribe. And the practice that has been working well, according to National NAGPRA, is that federally recognized tribes can make claims on requests for repatriation, and then do a separate transfer or request with a non-federally recognized tribe. And that can pose challenges, but we've had great success in working with federally recognized tribes. And, you know, David, you and Jake, we were recently at a wonderful training in Sacramento and heard directly from a federally recognized tribal member who said they recognize that it can appear challenging and difficult for non-federally recognized tribes as well as us as coordinators, but also reminded us that this is tribal politics and to stay sort of in our lane.
I mean, he certainly emphasized the fact with the rest of the audience. You mentioned, I'm wondering about what about ancestor or artifact where you're able to
identify ancestry or the tribal ancestry. Or you also mentioned like Yoko's tribe, where there may be artifacts or ancestors, there may not be a current representative to be able to bring something back to someone. So how does the process happen, or what happens in those cases?
Ouch, that's a loaded question there, Dr. Olson, but I'm sorry. So. We touched on tribal consultation, and so during that, when we're inviting tribes to consult. And we're explaining to them, these are the extent of the collections that we have here after we've performed our summaries on our inventories of our individual campuses. In relation to the CSU system, how I'm speaking about this. We're also explaining to them at the same time that we have these collections that we haven't been able to identify. And so we're leaning on our tribal partners for providing their tribal knowledge, the inherent knowledge of the area that they've been living in, that these artifacts or ancestral remains or whatever it may be that we haven't been able to identify, that they might know based on their tribal knowledge what that is, where it belongs to. They might be able to pinpoint to us that it's from this tribe up north, and that has nothing to do with us. And also just looking at records, so that's very record heavy. We're researching, we're calling old contacts that might have been involved with that particular extraction. If we have the knowledge of where that came from, there are collections that not just at this institution, but other institutions where there is no provenience and provenance, means that we have no idea the geographical location or site where the specific material came from. And I don't know if Curtis maybe has more experience with it from a tribal perspective on how you would go about identifying unknown collections.
Yeah, there's a couple ways I go about it. I look at the general bulk of what's there already. Maybe I had a couple instances where we've had some stuff, some objects at a museum across the nation, but then I look at the rest of the options that they have, and the bulk of it is from there. So if 90% of it's already in the area, it's already identified in the area, just how you just refer to the area. And that happens quite a bit where it's just underneath. So I never just refer to the local area. And I've had that for a lot of museums here too, but it's underneath tribes around here that not specifically Kern County, but Inyo County, Santa Barbara County, San Bernardino County, and those the first, the local tribes here because you don't know. And there's a documentation. It happens quite a bit. If you look at all the documentation in the early 1900s, sometimes it's 1 page long, sometimes it's 3 words, sometimes it's 10 pages. It just depends on the pick up time. I've had an instance where there was like an ancestor that they gave us the street name and we looked it up, and it also said it could be from Santa Barbara County or it could be San Bernardino County. And it said it on the paper. It's like so I just refer to the local area. That
Other questions?
I think
Yeah. Brooks, I'm a alumni and also a student registering. Project community. My question is to Mr. Pollman. Okay. What advice can you give to new students or the new generation on how to move forward in studying the leader and learning about the 55 recognized to 100 unrecognized tribe for the new generation? What advice can you give? Start with you, baby.
Oh, okay. Well, so not just in a professional capacity, but also as myself, an Indigenous person, I think one of the easiest ways to get involved with learning more about the tribes federally recognized or unfederally recognized, or even there also are tribes that are not recognized statewide or federal. And so that's also an issue, but that's another conversation for another day. Is to get involved locally. That's the easiest way you can do, is to get involved locally, see what local tribes are around, see if they have cultural events. For instance, the Home Indian tribe just had their powwow. So going to events like powwows, gatherings, if there's a Indian health clinic in town, which we do have one. Seeing if they have events, and usually at those types of events, you're gonna be able to engage with Indigenous people from all walks of life, professional, educational, and then also here at school, seeing what we do for the Indigenous Faculty and Staff Association and the Native Indigenous Student Coalition Club, getting involved in the club. And so if you're a student, be a part of the club, see what the club is doing here on campus, what they're doing in the community, meet the members, get to be involved with them, connect with me. Meet me after a year, I'll give you my business card and we can connect, so things like that, seeing what our tribal partners are doing, not just here locally too, but also, you know, in Fresno, Porterville, down south, up north. Google has a bunch of different resources for you all to look at, different resources to connect with tribal partners from across the country, Canada, South America, Central America, so there's lots of different avenues for you to explore.
Yes, I want to echo what just David said about community engagement, reaching out to the community. I know, for example, as a professor, that's one of the things that I like to do to reach out to communities, provide community engagement curriculum in my courses so that students are aware of the forest differences between tribes. So that's one of the things that I want to reiterate, the importance of that, recognizing all Indigenous peoples, all Native peoples. Definitely reaching out to communities, creating partnerships with communities. And in this case, I'm talking about my role as a professor, providing that to my students. But as David said, being aware that Native communities are active communities here in our area. Also finding those spaces throughout campus. As David said, the Native Student Coalition, the Indigenous Faculty and Staff Association, we organized several events in campus every semester. So just keeping an eye out on what happens, what events we're holding, and coming out to these events.
Yeah, but I echo what they said, as a student, I know they have, a lot of people know, but I met David at the Native American Student Coalition President. The Student Coalition Club, we were part of the same club, and I know they have their table out there with arts and crafts, and little events. They just had a career event, I think, here on campus. Where they had a table out there, I think we just had some arts and crafts table as well. If you want to learn stuff, the table has. Just ask, what it's about, ways to connect, ways to learn about the culture. Again, what David said, if you want to learn about NAGPRA, what he does, just talk to him. He's a very open guy, talks a lot. If you want to learn about tribes, it's our got a small office. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. And really just taking the initiative, like David said, Google definitely learns a lot, we can teach you a lot. There's a lot of anthropologists around here that wrote a lot of documentation, a lot of books. It really just depends on what area you're interested in. But if you're interested in a specific area, there's a lot of Alfred Kroger, a lot of J.P. Harrington, a lot of anthropologists that you can learn a lot from. And again, the powwow, that was definitely a big one too, if you want to learn about the culture. But I would definitely reach out to your local peers too. That's probably the best way to start with.
Jake, can you kind of speak on your experience being involved in Indigenous communities, on how you were able to not just insert yourself, but become a practitioner in those communities, learning from those communities in your work?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I don't want to interrupt. I think someone was going. Was that?
No, you're okay. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, yeah, just like opportunity at universities to participate in research opportunities. A lot of times tribes will be working with universities. That's how I got involved as an undergrad. But yeah, essentially, trying to learn more. I was going to say a great resource is also the National Park Service. They often have workshops and webinars that are very informational. So definitely recommend that as another resource for learning about opportunities. And yeah, with tribes themselves too, a lot of tribes will have informational webinars and workshops. So being able to participate, as an observer and, just observe and ask questions and learn more about this process. I think that's a great approach.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone has said, and in my personal approach, it's heavily relied on getting out and engaging with local tribal members. There's a lot of various public events that are put on, and attending those, asking questions, being curious, and I'm formally educated in a lot of history related to settler colonialism and anthropological history, and really trying to learn from the mistakes of the past and to move forward. And the relationship building is key. And I think that the one way to do that effectively is to show up and be honest. And you will make mistakes, but in my experience, Indigenous tribal members are forgiving if you have good intentions. And yeah, that's what I would say to anybody.
Thank you. I think we have a question online.
Yeah, one final question on mine is, moving forward, you'll see us when we add more Indigenous or American Indian classes or programs. Do you have a sense about that?
I'm gonna defer to my colleague to my left.
Yes, so Native American Indigenous Studies here on campus is housed in Ethnic Studies. So we just recently submitted our proposal for our major for our BA in Ethnic Studies, so that should be good to go very soon. We have our minor in Ethnic Studies, and we have different contributions that includes Native American Indigenous Studies. And we do already have courses in Native American Indigenous Studies. We have our introductory course and some other additional courses. So when you are ready to enroll in courses, so look out for those under the Ethnic Studies discipline.
Yeah, I think that's sort of wrap.
At the end of our time for today's event here, I want to thank you all for coming. I think we also need to thank each of our panelists. So thank you so much. I'm glad you all can join us. If there are people that want to know more about this event, we did record this event and we're going to post it on our Kegley Institute of Ethics YouTube page. And we're talking about some other places we can post it too. So I think fantastic information, very informative for me too, and for our whole community. And I'm looking forward to more events and more conversations and more courses on these topics. So thank you again, and look forward to seeing you at another event coming up soon.